but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea, and after a lot of argument, they'd all agreed to it. "No good roasting 'em now, it'll take all night," said a voice. Bert thought it was William's. "Don't start the argument all over again, Bill," he said, "or it will take all night." "Who's that arguing?" said William, who thought it was Bert who had spoken. "You are," said Bert. "You're a liar," said William, and so the argument began all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot, and they took out their knives. "No good boiling 'em. We ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all," said a voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom's. "Shut up," said they, "or we'll never have done. And you can fetch the water yourself if you say any more." "Shut up yourself," said Tom, who thought it was William's voice. "Who's arguing but you, I'd like to know?" "You're a booby," said William. "Booby yourself," said Tom. And so the argument began all over again and went on hotter than ever until at last they decided to sit on the sacks one by one, squash them, and boil them till next time. "Who shall we sit on first?" said the voice. "Better sit on the last fellow first," said Bert, whose eye was still damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking. "Don't talk to yourself," said Tom. "But if you wants to sit on the last one, sit on him. Which is he?" "The one with the yellow stockings," said Bert. "Nonsense! The one with the gray stockings," said a voice like William's. "I made sure it was yellow," said Bert. "Yes, yellow it was," said William. "Then what did you say gray for?" said Bert. "I never did," Tom said. "Tom said it." "That I never did," said Tom. "It was you." "Two of you, shut your mouth," said Bert. "Who are you a-talking to?" said William. "Now stop it," said Tom and Bert together. "The night's getting on and the dawn's come early. Let's get on with it." "Dawn take you all and be stoned with you," said a voice that sounded like William's, but it wasn't. And for just a moment the light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned to stone as he stooped, and Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him. And there they stand to this day, all alone, unless the birds perch on them. For trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains that they are made of, never to move again. That is what happened to Bert and Tom and William. "Excellent," said Gandalf, and stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down out of the thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that had kept the trolls bickering and quarreling until light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarves. They had nearly suffocated and were very annoyed. They had not at all enjoyed lying and listening to trolls making plans for roasting them and squashing them and mincing them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what had happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. "Silly time to go practicing pinching and pocket-picking," said Bomber, "when what we wanted was fire and food. And that's just what you wouldn't have got without these fellows, without a struggle in any case," said Gandalf. "Anyhow, you're wasting time now. Don't you realize the trolls must have a cave or hole dug somewhere near to hide the sun? From the sun, we must look into it." They searched about, and soon they found the marks of trolls' stony boots going away through the trees. They followed the tracks up the hill until, hidden by bushes, they came on a big door of a stone leading to a cave. But they could not open it, not though they all pushed while Gandalf tried various incantations. "Would this be any good?" asked Bilbo when they were getting tired and angry. "I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight." He held out a largish key. though no doubt William had thought it very small and secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, which is very lucky, before it turned to stone. "Why on earth didn't you mention it before?" they cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it into the keyhole, and the stone swung back with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor. A nasty smell was in the air. There was also a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground and among the untidy litter of plunder, and all sorts of brass buttons to pots full of gold coins standing in the corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I am afraid they belonged to their victims, and among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would only have made a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for the hobbit. "Take a look at these good blades," said the wizard, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. "They were not made by any troll, nor any smith among men in the parts these days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them." "Let's get out of this horrible smell," said Feely. So they carried out the pots of coins and such food as was untouched and looked fit to eat, and also one barrel of ale, which was still full. By that time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn up their noses to what they had gotten from a troll's larder, their own provisions being very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire. After that they slept, for their night had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies away and carried the pots of gold and buried them very secretly, not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had a chance to come back and recover them. When that was done, they all mounted once more and jogged along the path towards the east. "Where did you go to, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," he said. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," said he. "Exactly," said Thorin. "But could you be more plain?" "I went out to spy out our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there in a few days now, if you're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met two of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of trolls. It was they who told me that 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled into the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone off from this district, and they were waylaying strangers. I immediately had the feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw the fire in the distance and made for it. So now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel the danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from trolls. One morning they forded the river on a wide, shallow place full of noise and stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and dreary it looked. though there were patches of sunlight on the brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tips of snow peaks gleamed. "Is that the mountain?" said Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen something so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have got to get through or over or under those somehow before we can come to the wild land beyond. And it is a deal of a way from the other side of them to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than he ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing. Not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest in reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them. And we have to come back and start the beginning again, if you get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You have come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounded nice and comforting, but they had not got there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees, and no valleys, and no hills to break up and meet the feet of the nearest mountain. And the wide land color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green showing where the water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden among almost anywhere between there and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides. They opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them. And they looked down and water at the bottom. There were gullies they could almost leap over, but very deep, with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump nor climb into. There were bogs, some sort of green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked on there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones. Some of them were small, and others were half covered with moss or heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business. Following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not yet risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of the steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here at last!" he called, and the others gathered around and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley's side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped into the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded nearly off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak. There was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. Smells like elves, thought Bilbo as he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright. Just then came a burst of song like laughter in the trees. And if you want to hear that song, we will cover that in part 8. Thank you for watching Role Play Riot.